Okay, welcome to Csit 311 Information Security Principles. This is session 2, and we'll be treating the need for security. The need for security. As a session overview, we'll be looking at 1, the primary mission of an information security program, which is to ensure that systems and their content remain the same. Organizations expend hundreds of thousands of dollars and thousands of man-hours to maintain their information system. If threats to information and systems didn't exist, these resources could have been used to improve the systems that support the information, which is very true, because we realize that if we had no one attacking anyone or any information you're going to use, and there were no threats to whatever you were doing, you could use those billions of your currency to do other things, to buy other resources for your business. As another overview, we'll look at how attacks of information systems are a daily occurrence, and the need for information security grows along with the sophistications of such attacks. So as we are having attacks daily, the need to be able to secure the information also has to grow in the same scale to be able to have the information properly secured. Also, you realize that organizations must understand the environment in which information systems operate so that their information security programs can address actual and potential problems. This session describes this environment and identifies the threats it poses to organizations and their information. As an outline for the session, which is dealing with the need for security, the first we'll look at is the business need. Then we'll look at threats, we'll look at some attacks, then we'll look at secure software development. Okay, the reading list for this can be found in the chapter 2 of the recommended texts, which is Principles of Information Security. As learning objectives, upon completion of this, our hope is that you'll be able to demonstrate that organizations have a business need first for information security. Every business in our world today has a priority to be able to secure the information they're using for their business. And also that we'll be able to explain why a successful information security program is the responsibility of both an organization's general management and IT team. Many a time when we talk about information security, it is perceived that there's the IT part of a company are the ones who are responsible for that. But we'll come to realize that we need both the IT team and the general management, from the CEO right down to everybody on the chat, to be able to let this happen. Also, that we'll be able to identify the threats posed to information security and the more common attacks associated with those threats, and differentiate threats to the information within systems from attacks against information within systems. So we have certain things that happen which can be classified as threats, and we have others which are attacks. At the end of this session, it is expected that we'll be able to differentiate what a threat is and what an attack is. Then we'd also want to be able to describe the issues facing software developers, as well as the most common errors made by developers, and explain how software development programs can create software that is more secure and reliable. Okay. The primary mission of information security is to ensure systems and content stay the same. The primary aim of information security generally is to make sure that information or the content that we are working with, whether you are a business or an organization or an enterprise, that your information that you are using is intact, it remains the same. That is the primary mission of information security. Another thing to note is that if no threats existed, like I said earlier, if there are no threats, then we can use all our money, channel it into other resources for our business, just to be able to let the business grow. And also, another thing worth noting is that attacks on information system is happening even as we speak. It's on the hour-to-hour occurrence. It's not monthly or yearly. So let's look at our first need for security. Why the need for security? The first one that we'll look at is the business need. The business need. You know, information security performs 4 major functions for just about any organization. The first one is that it protects ability to function. Information security protects how a business functions. If a business is functioning and it is rest assured that the information that they are using for their business is secure, the business is more reliable, it is trusted. So having secure information allows the function of a business to happen. Another important function of information security for an organization is it enables safe operation of applications implemented in its IT systems. There are so many businesses, there are so many organizations who are running so many and all kinds of applications. If information security is well implemented in an organization, what it does is that it allows for all these applications which are being used to be safe in their operation. Another important function worth noting which information security provides for an organization is that it protects data the organization collects and uses. In every organization's day-to-day transaction, it sends information, it receives information, and it processes information. Having secure information allows and gives you the protection you need around the data that you have collected that you are using for your transaction. And lastly, information security performs the important function of safeguarding technology assets in use. With that said, let's look at some threats. Now, when we say threat, what is a threat? There's this myth about threats being the same as some of the viruses that we find around. We'll find out soon how true that is. When we say threat, a threat could be, first and foremost, an object. A threat could be a person or any other entity that represents a constant danger to an asset. When you have an asset and a certain object or a person or some other entity poses some form of danger to that particular asset, that entity is termed a threat. Also, management must be informed of the different threats facing organizations. In every organization, the management must always be made known that these are the kinds of threats that we have, especially with regards to the kind of business that they are running. And it is also worth knowing that overall security is improving according to a lot of survey that is going on. So we cannot live in the blind. They must always be updated. Management must always be in the known about the kinds of threats that are there, because research is being done day in and day out, and they are being documented to be able to allow for management to be able to know about what is happening. Now, there are so many threats to information security. I'll mention a few, then we would look at the rest later on. There are so many categories of them. I'll mention about 4 or 5 of them. We have compromises to intellectual property. It has to do with piracy. A typical example is the entertainment media. You have something produced, then someone is able, you copyright it, but still people find a way to copy it and reproduce without your copyright. They don't pay any penalties and all that. So that's a threat which has to do with compromising intellectual property. Another category of threats is software attacks. That is the one that we are most open to, which comprises of viruses, worms, denial of service, etc., etc. We have espionage or trespass. We have deviation in quality of service. When, especially in the telecommunications sector, you realize that you are making a call and you are not having the quality that has been advertised that you are supposed to have, and so on and so forth. All these are kinds of threats. They are forms or categories of threats. And if you're an organization, you should be known to the possibility of the existence of all these kinds of threats. Now, let's pick just a few of the categories of threats. Let's look at the compromises to intellectual property. Now, when we say intellectual property, what are we talking about? We're talking about the ownership of ideas and control over the tangible or virtual representation of those ideas. When you have your own idea, to own the idea and own how you control those ideas, whether it's in a tangible form or in a virtual form, makes you have the intellectual property over that particular idea. And most businesses hold on to such things because that is what gives the business brand and allows for the uniqueness of whatever solution they are providing to their customers. The most common intellectual property breach, like I mentioned earlier, is software piracy. Using an example of the entertainment media, the movie industry, which is virtually collapsing because of piracy, you realize then that the intellectual property breach is a very major hit as far as a threat is to the entertainment media. We have two organizations worldwide that are recognized to investigate into the abuse of software. The first of them is known as the Software and Information Industry Association. The second is known as the Business Software Alliance. These are two bodies who are known as watchdogs organizations. They investigate into software abuse. Now, the enforcement of copyright law has been attempted with technical security mechanisms. Currently, when we come to copyright, we have so many security measures that have been incorporated, which didn't used to exist, just to be able to curb the compromise to intellectual property. Okay, let's look at the second category of threat, which is known as deliberate software attack. Deliberate software attack. This is where you find that malicious softwares are designed purposely to damage, to destroy, or to deny service to targets. You may have had this experience where, for instance, you are browsing something on the internet, you're using the internet for a certain search, and all of a sudden it's as if the network totally just slows down on you. And you go blaming your internet service provider. It is not always the case that the line is totally used up because the service provider is not giving quality of service, but it could also be a purposed attack that someone has created in the form of software and sent onto your network just to use up all the resources and slow down whatever activity that you're doing. And such deliberate software attacks include viruses, worms. The most popular we hear around, Trojan horses. We have another one called logic bombs. We have one called backdoor or trapdoor, and so on and so forth. So these are all deliberate software attacks that are in existence. Another form of attack, which is one of the most common we find around, is the shoulder surfing. When you are at the ATM to do something and someone looks over your shoulder, you are working behind your PC, someone passes behind you, and they are trying to figure out what you are doing, to have access to what password you are entering, and so on and so forth. These are all forms of attacks. We have another, that is the forces of nature. When it comes to the forces of nature, it's a little unfortunate, but it is one that cannot be controlled because no one knows when lightning will strike. No one knows when a flood will happen. No one knows when an earthquake will happen. So forces of nature are among one of the most dangerous threats that exist. They disrupt not only individual lives, but also storage, transmission, and use of information. So force of nature as a threat category is one of the most dangerous because it comes to destroy not just one thing, but usually the whole setup. Under forces of nature, organizations must implement controls to limit damage and prepare contingency plans for continued operations. This is where you come across all these virtualizations so that should, let's say, a fire break out in one of your offices and all your files are lost. They are only lost to the physical location, but you have backup stored elsewhere and so on and so forth. So this is one way that organizations can be able to keep their operations running when they are faced by a forces of nature attack. Now, another category of attack that we want to look at is the human error or failure. We are human beings, and there's this adage that says that to err is human and to forgive is divine. Yes, once we are human beings, it means that another possible source of threats to our own organization that we have been employed to is we ourselves, and some of the errors we cause and some of the failures that we provide in our operations. It includes acts performed without any malicious intent. It could be that you were doing what you thought was right, and it has ended up harming the company. So human error and failure also has its own role to play when it comes to the kind of threats that's exposed to an organization. You have certain causes to include inexperience. When you find an inexperienced person given a role that they are not up to, you will surely come across a lot of human error, and that could cause a lot of failure to a lot of systems. Another could be improper training. When you pick staff to do something in your organization, you might be mindful to want to train them properly so that they don't become the ones that will cause you to have insecure information or leaked information within your organization. Then another human error point is caused by incorrect assumptions. You need to be careful about the kind of assumptions that the people, individuals, or groups in your company, organization make. Because when they become the source of the error, they might not have had the intent, but they just might have made the wrong assumptions about a certain step to take. And all of these are categorized under the human error or failure with regards to category of threat. Now, employees are among the greatest threats to an organization's data. We know that we are always looking at hackers, some people sitting in some other place who are always wanting to harm our organizations, but what most organizational management forgets to look at is the fact that their own employees that they have given the chance to be part of the organization are one of the biggest points of threat in the organization as far as using of their data is concerned. Now, employee mistakes can easily lead to 1, revelation of classified data, 2, entry of erroneous data, 3, accidental data deletion or modification, 4, data storage in unprotected areas, and 5, failure to protect information. All of these things can happen from an employee, and unfortunately, these also account for threats that an organization can have. Many of these threats can be prevented with controls, certainly. So you find that in most systems that are built, even when you're about to close a document, it asks you, do you want to save? Then sometimes it just brings you back to a prompt. Then you check, did I really want to close the document? And so on and so forth. So there are so many control measures that can be put in place to allow for such human error to be kept, if not totally eradicated. Now, there's this concept known as information extortion. What is information extortion? When an attacker steals information from computer systems and now demands compensation for its return or non-disclosure, you find a lot of people having people hack into their bank accounts, and you'll get messages later telling them that, okay, so I have your credit card number and so on and so forth. Give me this amount of money, else I'll do this or I'll do that, or I have access to this file of yours, which you thought you had secured, and so on and so forth. If you find yourself in such a position, it is categorized as information extortion. Now let's look at another concept, theft. Theft is not just being robbed of your money in a bus or losing an asset that you might have left in a room. It goes beyond that. As far as information security is concerned, the illegal taking of another's physical, electronic, or intellectual property can be considered as theft. And physical theft is easy to control, but when it comes to electronic theft, now it's more complex, because how do you even show evidence of the crime that you are talking about? How do you tell other people that I got access to your credit card number? How do you tell people that I have access to your ATM card PIN? It's a very difficult thing to do. So if it has to do with a physical asset like a PC, it's easy to control, but it's very difficult if it's electronic. Now we have certain technical hardware failures or errors. We have some that occur when the manufacturer distributes equipment containing flaws. So some of the threats that are posed to organizations could be technical hardware failures or errors. How is that? I might produce a certain hardware which already has its errors in there from manufacturer, and that's code. Let's pick computer for instance. You probably punch plus on the keyboard, and all this while technically it's saying minus as an example. So technically, in all your additions in an accounting software in an organization, you could just actually just be debiting the accounts of the company instead of crediting them. And that is a technical hardware failure, and this is a threat also. This also goes to tell us that the kinds of threats that we come across is not only from the human error or from the software, but it also could be from the hardware. Now, hardware failures or errors can cause systems to perform outside or expected parameters, resulting in unreliable or poor service, which relates to the example that I've just given. Now, some of these errors are terminal, which means that once it is committed, there's no turning back. Others are intermittent, so they occur once in a while, and you sometimes find a way to go about curbing it and moving on. But this is worth noting that some of the errors that we have are from technical hardware failures. We also have that which has to do with software failures too. You purchase a software that contains unreviewed faults. We sometimes call them bugs and so on, so usually you need to get an update for it. This is also a source. You can also have a combination of certain software and hardware that can reveal new software bugs. Then the entire website dedicated to documenting bugs also exists. So to be able to curb this, you might be mindful to want to go back and check to be sure that you are not having your threats from any of these sources. With that said on threats, let's look at some attacks. What are attacks? Attacks simply could be actions or acts that exploit vulnerability. That is an identified weakness. So you find a certain weakness somewhere, then you want to exploit it. Then we say that you are attacking whatever that thing is. What are some of the attacks that we have? We'll run through some of these very quickly. We have malicious codes. We have hoaxes. We have backdoor. We have password crack. We have brute force. We have dictionary, and so on and so forth. We have denial of service, which is one of the most common ones, especially with the use of the internet. You just flood the network with a lot of packets and everything slows down. So the service that the authorized person is supposed to have, they don't seem to be have the resources to be able to go about that business because someone has just flooded the network and they're not able to access the information. You realize that sometimes checking your mail is even very delayed and you're wondering what at all is happening on the network. It's usually due to denial of service attacks. They will not take anything from you, but they'll use up the resources on the network, so you can't have access to be able to do what you want to do. And this happens usually per host or distributed, so they can target certain particular points to put such flooded packets just to slow you down. Then, with that said, we have an idea what attacks is, we have an idea what threats are. We want to look at secure software development. If we have threats happening, we have attacks in existence. How can we secure software in its development? So what's happening is that many information security issues that are discussed here are caused by software elements of the system. Now, the development lifecycle has certain methods that allows for you to incorporate security. So most organizations now have included procedures that will create more secure software. And this software development approach is now known as software assurance. Software assurance. There are certain problems that software development security faces. I'll run through briefly some of them. There are a lot. We have what we call buffer overruns, command injection, cross-site scripting, failure to handle errors, and so on and so forth. So in summary, we want to recap why we need security, like the session title says, the need for security. We want to know, we have come to realize that unlike any other aspect of IT, information security's primary mission is to ensure that things stay the way they are. So anything that is not going to allow the information, the data you're working with to stay the way it is, gives you the need for security so that you can protect your data from change. Then you can be able to allow your business to run successfully. We've also realized that information security performs 4 major functions. It protects organizations' ability to function, it enables safe operations, it protects data that the organization collects and uses, then it safeguards the technology assets in use at the organization. Then we have come to learn about threats, and that threats could be an object, a threat could be a person, threats could be an entity that is representing a certain danger to certain assets. We've also learned that management effectively protects its information through policies, education, training, and technological controls. We've come to know about attacks. and we know that an attack is a deliberate act that exploits vulnerability. Then we've learned lastly that secure systems require secure software. With this, we come to the end of this session. Thank you.